Hey guys, this is Fergal from PokerVIP. Welcome back to part 4 of our coaching player review over on TonyBet Poker. So it'll be the exact same format we've done through parts 1 through 3. We're watching player Physics, who's a PokerVIP member over on the forums there. We are watching him 4-table and no limit hold'em over on TonyBet. So we currently have 2 tables of 25NL, 1 of 5NL, and 1 of 10NL on the go. We're going to be commenting on his play as we go through and looking for any potential leaks in his game, and hopefully we will get into some interesting spots as we go through. So the 7-jack suited, we have a pretty trivial open spot here on the button. Okay, we get a caller, we flop the flush draw, don't mind that. Going ahead and firing a c-bet here is going to be pretty good. We got 3-bet with ace-jack suited. I think folding here is definitely too tight, unless we have some sort of specific read on that player that he is 3-betting way too tight. I think ace-jack suited is too strong to be raise folding from the cutoff versus a blind 3-bet. That queen really sucks. He just called us with the king 10, that is heartbreaking. Yeah, the queen is a really bad card for us to keep barreling on there. When he check calls, I'm going to give him credit for a lot of pairs, typically. The fact that he's just check calling with his gut shot there is indicative of a weaker player. Obviously, he was correct that instance, but I'm still not convinced that his play is going to be profitable there. There are some runouts there where we can keep bluffing with the 7-jack. But that queen is particularly awful. When our opponent does check, like obviously he will have a decent chunk of queen X there. And it just means that, you know, obviously he's never folding an ace either. And they will make up the bulk of his calling range there. Folding king jack from under the gun in a 5-handed game seems too tight to me. I'd be happy to go ahead and bring that in for an open. It's worth noting that we are 5-handed on that table. Hello Kitty is sitting out. Okay, ace-10 suited. We are going to be 3-betting here, I hope, versus any open from the button on the cutoff, or sorry, from the button or the small blind. The button's folded. If the small blind raises, I'd be definitely happy to 3-bet. And we're opening, yeah, opening king 9. We like it. So our opponent making their decision. If our opponent 4-bets us here, this will be a spot where I would actually be inclined to just go ahead and 5-bet rip. Obviously blind versus blind is where 4-bet, you know, ranges are, that's what they're widest. Ace-10 suited has a lot of decent blockers to their strong Broadway holdings. We have, you know, a reasonable suited Broadway ace ourselves, so even when we do get called, we will have some equity. Obviously, we are doing it as a bluff, so we don't want to get called. But as far as hands go, that seems like a pretty reasonable one. The only assumption that we would make there is that, you know, we don't have any specific reads that our opponent is just an absolute nit. I like this double barrel here with the queen jack. The ace is a pretty good card for us to rep. The king, I don't like following through here. I think our opponent will show us a decent number of king X here, and it's kind of, yeah, I don't like this at all. And it's kind of hard for him to have that many drawy type hands. There's some missed straight draws and so on there, sure, but in general I don't think we're going to get remotely close to enough folds there to make that profitable. I think your double barrel is absolutely fine. Flop c-bet's perfectly fine. Turn is good, and if that king didn't pair, I'd be okay with following through. But the king pairing is just really, really awful for us. Okay, with the pocket threes here, I'm happy just to go ahead and fire small here. Half pot seems fine. I'm going to be inclined to bet this again. The main reason is if he has an overpair. Oh, what? Oh, that's not actually that good a river. I just realised that the king still beats us, so it's still not a hand we can look to play for stacks for. But if he does have, like, let's say if he has a hand like sevens, we can bet again on a... Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there now. So if he has a hand like pocket sevens, then we're going to be calling a river bet anyway, and I would expect him to bet those kinds of hands. If he has a hand like ace high though, there's a reasonable chance he's going to call there in the double paired board as well, so we can get value from some ace high hands. And as I said, his pocket pairs, we're not really giving away too much there by betting the turn, because he's just going to call those anyway, and he's going to check to us on the river, so we can check down quite easily. But as I said, versus his ace high hands, we're just giving him free equity basically, for free. He could potentially call, so we do get paid, and it seems like a better play all around to me. This queen is a bit of a disaster with an SPR of 0.6 or 0.7 or whatever. I think I'm okay with just putting the money in. If he ever folds a pair under the queen, it's just an incredibly good result for us. But yeah, it's just one of those spots where there's not really too much we can do. Pocket eights, fine opening that under the gun. Pocket four is pretty bad flop for us, of course. No harm, no foul there, and just check and giving up. Ace five suited, I do include this in my under the gun opening range. Pocket nines, of course, standard open. I think check folding that board seems pretty reasonable. It's 7-8 suited in the bottom left table. If this goes multi-way, we can call pretty profitably here. Heads up, I'd be less inclined to do so, and when the 3-bet comes in from under the gun +1, there's obviously nothing we can do. 9-5 suited, I like this defend. Facing him in open, it's very hard to justify folding suited cards, blind versus button. We lead on the Jack 4-4. Not sure if I'm a huge fan of that. Like it's a board where he's going to c-bet a decent chunk of the time. So if we want to make a play at it, we can consider going for a check raise. Obviously it's more expensive, but going for a lead like that, I'm just not convinced how often we're going to get believed. Like if I'm there and I have a hand like ace high, I don't think I'm folding to a single lead, and we do open ourselves up to getting attacked by some raises as well. And it's just a hand that, if he is continuing, we just have very, very little equity. Seven, eight offsuit, not much we can do, just let it go. Same goes for the 9 deuce suited. Then from mid position, even offsuit, it's a hand that we can consider opening. The tables, I have noticed, they have been a little bit aggressive though, so in general, opening hands like that at aggressive tables is going to be worse because you're going to get 3-bet more frequently. If it's a reasonably passive table or an overly nitty table, then I'm definitely fine including it as an open. Okay, the ace queen up in the top left table. I'm happy to just check this back. We have a hand that has chunks of showdown value. We're going to be ahead of his general flatting range. But it's a board where he can make some plays, and it's just we're never going to fold out any of his pairs. So we just allow him to play really, really good poker when we c-bet here. And our hand is quite face up here now. When he leads here, we just have a trivial call. I'm a bit concerned about his lead, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, kind of tilting that he calls with the ace high and just binks the 9, but however. So we can argue that we got value there from that worse hand. But in general, when we do get continued against there, we're going to be in a decent chunk of trouble. A really, really unfortunate run out for us, of course, where he just runners the 2-pair, giving us top pair good kicker in the end. But as I said, when he does lead there, our hand is somewhat face up. You know, we're going to have a decent amount of strong ace-x there. So when he does lead, I was concerned. Obviously, we can't ever consider folding there, but I wasn't loving situation. The queen-8 suited, obviously a completely trivial open. Pretty good flop for us. Out of all of the flops, that is one of the better ones. Alright, we got to start betting now. I think we can go reasonably big here, maybe about €2. Yeah, I like it. Can't go enormous, unfortunately, but we can't go big enough. Don't think there's too much merit to checking there. I think they're going to have more sort of marginal showdown than they will have hands they want to start bluffing. You can have the king of diamonds, obviously, but that's about it. And there's a reasonable chance that he bets the king of diamonds when checked on the flop. So when he calls the turn, I think he's going to be more heavily weighted towards those kind of marginal 1-pair hands that we want to really push for value, but it's very unlikely they're going to go for value themselves. So when we get led into here in this board, I am leaning towards just flatting. I'm not a huge fan of raising. Yeah, I prefer the flat. So we pick up a weak flush draw, and we also have a gut shot. This is an interesting spot. I don't think I'm going to fold here to this guy. He has been one of the more aggressive players. It's a really interesting run out. Getting value seems incredibly optimistic, so I don't like betting here with this weak a flush. He can show up with some better flushes here, so it's not like we have, you know, the stone cold nuts or anything close to it. And it's going to be really hard to get paid by sets here. He can have some sets for sure. He can have some straights. I mean, he can definitely lead. Yeah, I like checking there. So ideal run out for us, but as I said, I don't envision that we get paid by 2-pair there. So betting that river seems completely unnecessary. Just seems like we're going to value on ourselves way too frequently, and very rarely get value. So we just rip the money in with the ace-king here. Pretty easy spot. Again, if we get the fold, we pick up a pretty decent sized pot. Yeah, twos. I like folding twos from under the gun open. But yeah, if we ever get the fold through, we pick up a pretty decent pot without risk. If we get called, we're flipping a decent chunk of the time. Occasionally we can get called by worse ace-x, which is fantastic. And yeah, there's no calling and playing a pot in position there. It doesn't seem particularly good. Just ripping it in and really maximising our fold equity there if he ever wants to 4-bet a pocket pair and fold it, which, you know, people have been known to do. Seems like a perfectly viable strategy. Queen 4 the small blind. If it's folded to us, if we have any specific reads that are big blind, it's right outside my general opening range. So if we have any sort of read that the small blind is, or the big blind rather, is too tight, we can consider expanding our range to include it, but that's only if it's folded to us, of course. And without that read, I'm happy just to go ahead and fold. So the ace-6, obviously we're opening. I think we're happy to go ahead and fire on the 10-8 deuce. We decide to check back, turn the flush draw, which is quite nice. I quite like turning this hand into a bluff. We're repping reasonably strong here when we do this. We can definitely have some 2 pairs that play this way. And as I said, when we get the fold through, we win a reasonable sized pot with ace high, which can never be a disaster. And we always have reasonable equity when we get called as well. The only complete disaster is when we get 3-bet there on the flop. Or on the turn, should I say. Raising the 6-7 here doesn't seem like it accomplishes too much. Even when we do hit our straight. So, okay, we're going to go for the all-in here. Let me just have a quick think about this. So, what are we really repping here? I mean, in general, I don't get too concerned about this at 10 and L. But if our opponent is in any way a thinking player, when the diamond's missed, I'm not sure how much I love ripping it in here. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily awful. The king is going to be a pretty damn bad card for our opponent's range usually, so I don't think it's a complete disaster doing so, but I think it's increasing our variance chunks and it's a reasonably close spot. I don't think this is going to be immensely profitable no matter what we do. So we go for the rip. We get the snap fold, which we definitely approve of. But as I said, I mean, I think check raising that turn seemed unnecessary, since our pair will be ahead a reasonable chunk of the time. When it's not, when we do improve to a straight, it's going to be pretty hard to get paid because there's 4 to a straight on the board. And I mean, if we are following through like that on rivers with, on big cards where we can pick it up a decent chunk against his 9x, then I guess there's a reasonable argument for it. But I'm still not entirely convinced that that play is going to be the optimal way to play that hand. Uh, 9-4, blind versus blind, we're happy just to go ahead and give this up. We're down to a 3-handed game, not sure if we're going to continue playing here or not. We're down to heads up now, so I'm guessing this table is going to break. At least I hope it do. Heads up is definitely not my forte. Whatever about 3-handed, I'm definitely not a heads up player. Okay, we have ace-4. We are going to keep playing by the looks of it. So we have ace-4, pretty easy open with any ace heads up. No, we are sitting out. Okay, the king-queen from the small blind. I'm happy to go ahead and 3-bet this. I like this. Okay. Not an ideal flop, but we do still have overs, we do still have the gut shot to the absolute nuts, so I'm okay with firing here. King is pretty good. I'd be inclined to check here just to induce. It's going to be just really hard to continue to get paid here, so I think checking turn and betting river seems optimal. We're more likely to get called down by a hand, like say he has like ace-10, stuff like that. I think we're more likely to get called by those kinds of hands by checking the turn and then going for value on the river. So I think the way you played that hand was pretty spot on. And 10-jack suited, we have a pretty easy open. We get 3-bet really small. As long as there's no 4-bet, we should see a flop here. We have the ace and the ace, which we like. Okay, so we flop middle pair. Donking out here accomplishes absolutely nothing, so we check the side. When it goes check, we're pretty happy here. I'm still not convinced that leading here is the best. We do get paid by, ace-king and stuff like that, but he's also going to show some kind of underpairs to the queen-jack that aren't all that likely to call a bet. Kind of curious what he did call with there. Seems like he can't have that many hands that call with there. Especially, I mean, as I said, ace-king is one of the few hands that he really should be calling there. It seems optimistic that he's calling with, worse than jack-x that isn't, at least drawing to the nuts a hand like ace-king. Maybe he just has a worse ace-high hand, but I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so 7-8 up on the top right table. We defend blind versus blind. We flop middle pair. We're certainly not folding here. We don't really want to see our opponent follow through with the big bet here. His flop sizing was quite huge. His turn sizing is quite huge. I'm going to be inclined just to go ahead and believe him here, just based on his sizing. We go ahead and call. This 10 is quite a good card. Like basically when he chooses the sizing he's choosing, he's essentially repping his like large overpairs. So this 10 should freeze him in his tracks right now. If he does go ahead and he bombs this river, I think when we call turn we have to call off this river, I think. I don't think there's any way that we can't. But as I said, I'm just going to pause it here before we act. So, as I said, I mean, his sizing just doesn't seem like he's going to have a 10 too often. Now, I'm not saying he can't, but he can have some hands like ace 10 and so on, I guess, and just want to really look to push for value against the draws. But generally, when people choose the like overly large sizing, they're kind of repping overpairs. And as I said, his overpairs really should be shutting down on this 10x card because we played our hand exactly like a 10. So that leaves, he can have, you know, his potential bluffs remaining. So his hearts, for example, will be a prime example of hands that he wants to bluff here. So when we do call the turn, I think we have to call the river. But as I said, I would be more inclined to go ahead and let this go on the turn. We're considering going for the all-in. Given how polarized I think he's going to be here, I'm not a fan of this at all. Yeah, we get snapped. So, yeah, okay, so as I said, when we take that line, I think he is polarized to 10x or no, like high card. I think it's very unlikely that, like I'm guessing what you were thinking there was you wanted to rep the 10 and get him to fold an overpair. For starters, I don't think he's going to show us enough overpairs there with the way it's played out. I'm really surprised that he shows us 10 jack there. That just seems wild. But I think our river jam is completely unnecessary and counterproductive there. So I would not be inclined to ever want to do that in that exact spot. And even repping the 10 to try to fold out the overpair, it's still, like as a general rule of thumb, I'm not a fan of trying to do that because a lot of people, they just don't really read they don't read lines very well. So they just think like, oh, I have the overpair, I call, kind of thing. So, you know, you wanna have a pretty specific read that people are capable of making reasonably good laydowns. And without that information, as I said, even in that spot, it just seems like a really bad spot to be doing it when he's likely to be quite polarized on that run out. Betting the flush draw seems pretty good to me. We get the call. I'd actually be inclined to bet small here again and look to get paid by 8x. Yeah. So it's really hard for him to have a king. We do value on ourselves a little bit, but I think there's definitely some value to be had there just by betting 10 jack suited small there. Ace king, we have a pretty easy open, of course. So again, this is a spot where betting ace king just doesn't really accomplish anything at all. We're still ahead of his range, but we're going to be folding out most hands that we're ahead of, and he's not really going to, we're never going to get him to fold any pair. So I'm not a huge fan of firing ace king as standard there. I think we can check call quite profitably. We can get him to bluff worse ace x on occasion, and yeah, we can just make good decisions on later streets then as well. Pretty good flop for us here with the trays. I think checking this king again and going for the check raise seems pretty good to me. When we check raise, we can go pretty big. We can go to we keep in mind that our image is pretty wild on this table as well. So I think your sizing here is way too small. If he has a king, he's not going to be folding, and if he doesn't have a king, he's going to be folding to pretty much any check raise anyway. So given that we've just shown down a pretty wild, I don't know, kind of depends how people interpret it. They might have interpreted that as just a weird sort of a weird kind of value line, but it seems unlikely. I don't know. People are going to think that you're a bit of a wild player, at least anyway. So we want to be utilizing that fact as much as possible. So when we are going for the check raise, when we've shown ourselves to be capable of making kind of weird, unusual moves, when we've gotten to showdown, we want to be taking advantage of that image as much as possible by going, large and really putting people in tough spots when we have such a nutted hand. So the king 8, I think we just gotta go bet there. Or well, certainly bet 2 streets anyway, and starting off on the flop seems best. The ace-7, 3-betting it seems pretty fine. We're going absolutely enormous with our sizing here. We're 5xing it, which seems too large to me. 4x out of position versus the min open seems perfectly fine. 5xing it, I don't think we really gain much additional fold equity, and it just means that we're risking an extra couple of big blinds when our opponent does continue. So it seems like we're just using additional chips with no real gain. Looks like I haven't actually seen how the action has played out here with the ace deuce. Looks like we're going to be looking to make a play at this to wrap up the session. I might revisit this hand. Okay, we know what the result is, but I might just go ahead and revisit that hand and just see how that played out. Okay, so we open ace deuce on the button, seems pretty standard. We get a caller. This board, I think I'm okay with c-betting this board. We're going to have more king x as the opener rather than him flat calling. I'm kind of surprised he didn't bet a hand like king queen, but I'm okay with the c-bet. When we get called here, I would be inclined to give up. And then we raise his lead here. Yeah, no, okay. I'm not a fan of the way we. I think pre-flop is perfectly fine. I think your flop is perfectly fine. I think your turn is perfectly fine. The river raise seems incredibly thin. I mean, again, just kind of going back to it here. It seems pretty unlikely to me that we're going to show up with flushes, that we don't kind of barrel our flushes, our flush draws. So we're really repping mainly just ace-jack. So ace-jack, sure, ace-jack makes a lot of sense. Our flush draws, though, I'm not convinced they make tons of sense. So when we do raise, I mean, obviously he is top 2, so it's a little bit different, but I do think we're going to get called by single king x here pretty frequently as well. So at the end of the day, I mean, king queen is pretty much the same here as, you know, a hand like king 9. So I don't think we're ever going to be raising a single pair. We could be raising, like, we could have maybe a hand like, say, king 6 potentially that we checked for some sort of deception value, but I'll be honest, I'm kind of reaching for justification here. I'm not a fan of the river raise anyway at all. All right, we got 3-bet with the ace king. I think we have a pretty slam dunk re-raise. I'd be inclined not to go all in here. I think we can just we can kind of just commit him pretty comfortably. I mean, it makes no difference. He calls off anyway. He just has the aces anyway. 10 for the chop? No. If I'm gonna call for cards, I probably should have called for the king for the win, but no. Unfortunately, that wraps it up. So overall, not an amazingly profitable session from what I can recall. Definitely some good play throughout, but I think a lot of the large pots that we lost throughout could have been avoided. So there's definitely been a few key spots where we ended up getting stacks in or going for overly optimistic raises on the rivers where we lost a hell of a lot more than we should have. I think in general, when we had the goods, we did a good job of getting value where we should. That's a good thing. But I think over-aggression can absolutely kill your win rate. I'm not saying, obviously, to be passive, to be a nit, because, you know, that's another way to kill your win rate, but you can definitely take that to a different extreme. And especially towards the end of the session here, I think that is definitely what we did. We ended up sort of punting awesome stacks in some less than optimal situations, shall we say. But anyway, that's it for the series, guys. I hope you have all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. As always, if you have any questions, queries, comments about any of the hands that have played throughout, feel free to leave them on the relevant social media. I'll endeavour to get back. And thank you very much for watching, and take care all.